Let's catch up with the economics editor of The Australian, Adam Crichton, now. He joins me now live from the Sydney CBD. I've got Dave Sharma, Pauline Hanson and Keith Pitt coming up, Adam, but I wanted to kick off with you because I thought your column today was so cut through and it plays into the current political debate so strongly. You've got a government that's sort of floundering around at the start of the political year, copying it from all directions, and your column says it doesn't really have a strong enough economic agenda. What is its economic agenda right now?
Well, look, it's a very good question. I don't think that there is much of an agenda. Of course, the column in question, I built it around the word resilience. As someone who, of course, reads a lot of government press releases, I noticed in recent months, basically since the middle of last year, that this word resilient just keeps cropping up, especially in the Treasurer's press releases. And I just noticed that they're always just saying that the economy is resilient. Even when the statistics that are coming out are really quite bad, and so I kind of made fun of that, and then I reflected on something that actually that Tony Abbott said recently was that the point of being in government is to take on vested interests, it's to have some sort of agenda, it's to it's to try to rock the boat, it's to change things kind of in the public interest, and I really don't think this coalition government, especially in its latest incarnation, kind of with the current Prime Minister Morrison, really has an economic agenda. The speech the Prime Minister gave in November last year to the Business Council really didn't have a central theme. He talked about so-called tax reform, but we all know the tax reform in 2024 is really just a partial reversal of bracket creep. It's not a major tax reform at all, and the so-called fixing of the government finances, well, I mean, to be honest, government debt has actually doubled under the coalition to about $570 billion. So it's really hard to see how they've fixed the finances either. And so if you strike those two things out, it doesn't really leave much else.
Yeah, I think John Howard always used to talk about economic reform as being a never-ending race, that the finish line keeps getting further away. You've always got to be looking at reforming. And I often think of governments as being like a boat on the ocean. Unless they're powering ahead, they're just going to be buttressed around by all the other factors. And I suppose that's what Scott Morrison needs to do, take on some more challenges, set the agenda and forge ahead with getting things done rather than being defensive, showing his resilience by being defensive.
Yeah, look, that's right. I think if you just reflect on all of the big, what I would call rent seekers of society, the health sector, the legal profession, the financial services sector, the unions, I mean, they're all pretty happy with the government, really. There are no complaints from those sectors. And I think in an era of stagnant wage growth, I mean, the way to boost people's wages basically is to shift some of those rents back to ordinary people, whether it's reform of the health system or the justice system or kind of whatever it is. But the federal government doesn't seem to have any ticker, if you like, to do that. I mean, the obvious one for me is compulsory super. I mean, this is not even a coalition policy. It's demonstrably failed in many ways. I mean, if you ask any kind of independent person, they will probably say that. The people that don't say that, of course, is the sector itself, which is no surprise. And so why not, if you're the government, basically give say, lower earning workers the option at least to take their super contributions up front as wages?
Now, I think in defence of the government, I think they've done a good job in steadying the economic ship. They've staunched the bleeding, the rampant growth in government spending. They have got taxes going down instead of going up. So very clearly their focus is on lowering taxes. What is it that they could do more, though? I mean, because they can't go around spending more money. Some of the areas, as you say, shaking up health, but I would have thought also in federation reform, trying to get instead of this federal government coming in and doing more over the states, shouldn't we be getting federal and state overlap out of the system and saving a lot of money for both layers of government that way?
Yeah, look, certainly that's true, and there was a white paper which was never finished, I think back in 2014-15, looking at that exact question. There was also a white paper looking at the welfare system as well, and the coalition government has taken up neither of those options to change things. Indeed, the New South Wales and Victorian governments have actually launched their own process of reform, which I think is very laudable, and so far at least the federal government has kind of ignored them because of its timidity. It doesn't want to upset the apple cart too much. I think it's quite disappointing.
Thanks for joining us, Adam. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Adam Crichton there from The Australian. I think a very timely kick up the pants, if you like, of the government, suggesting they ought to deepen their reform agenda. Let's speak to a government representative now. We're joined from Canberra by the Liberal member for Wentworth, Dave Sharma. Thanks for joining us, Dave.
It's good to be with you.
Tell us, how fiery was the climate debate in the Liberal Party room today?
Look, I've got a bit of a policy, Chris. I don't comment on party room meetings outside the party, but I don't think the discussion in the party room today was any different to the sorts of discussions I've heard in the past there. You know, we're a broad church, our party and the coalition is. We seek to represent a majority of Australians, and that means we're going to have a variety of views expressed by all of our members, and that's all to the good, I think.
Yeah, but your party has been tearing itself apart over climate policy for more than a decade, and obviously this morning demonstrated that's still the case.
I don't agree, Chris, and I think that the Prime Minister has set out the policy agenda here pretty clearly, including in his press club address last week. The Cabinet's all in behind that, and we're doing this. I mean, as he said, this is about technology, not taxation. This is about addressing climate change, but in a way that doesn't threaten the economy or threaten jobs. It's a sensible set of policies, and I think we'll be sticking with them.
Yeah, I'm told that your by-election loss back in 2018 was cited as evidence of problems with climate policy. That can't be right, can it? Because that was a by-election. You, of course, lost it because Malcolm Turnbull created the by-election, didn't publicly support you, and there was a resentment about him having lost the Prime Ministership. If climate change was the factor in the Wentworth by-election, you wouldn't have won it back at the general election.
Look, I think that by-election had a whole lot of series of events going on, or a series of causes behind it, and it's just like the bushfires, you can't attribute them to any one single cause. I think it was the same with my by-election loss. I mean, there was anger at the political instability in Canberra. There were people who are loyal Malcolm supporters who were very upset at the way he'd left or had been forced to leave in their mind. By-election, classic opportunity in Australia to register a protest vote against the incumbent government, and that's what was done then. So, no, I'd be hesitant to say it was down to any single factor at all.
Now, what about Jim Molan going on national television last night saying he's just got an open mind as to whether or not the warming we're seeing in the planet is caused by humans or not? Are you happy with that as a position from a prominent Liberal?
Look, I respect Jim's right to have different views. I mean, my own view is that human-induced climate change, our own contribution to CO2 is real. I think most of the empirical evidence supports that view. But I think the main question here is, well, what are we going to do about it? And I'd hope, and I think that even if people might disagree about the causes, or they might be uncertain about the causes, they think like a prudent set of policies that you'll take out insurance in case that is the case. I mean, we have a big defence force, for instance, not because we're always fighting wars, but because we hope not to have to fight a war. We have any number of things that the government does to basically build resilience into our economy and into our society. And I think this is an area where we need to act prudently. Even if people have different views about what's causing this, I think it's prudent to act as if humans are playing a role, and that we should try and reduce our role in that.
There's that word resilience that Adam Crichton was talking about. I notice it's on the top line of the government talking points at the moment. Who decided resilience is the new key word?
No, I think resilience has been fashionable for a number of years. I think I remember helping christen a Commonwealth Summit all about resilience. So I think it's one of these phrases that's meant to capture a whole lot of policies in one.
Very good. Now, is the coalition weaker for not having Matt Canavan in the cabinet?
Look, the Nationals have obviously, they've had an eventful day. They've reaffirmed the leadership of the Deputy Prime Minister. They've got a new Deputy Leader. But how they reach these decisions, look, it's a bit of a mystery to me. I'm not part of that party room. I don't know what goes on in there.
Sure, Dave Sharma. Sorry to cut you off. I'm sure we understand that you have no role in it. But of course, as a member of a coalition government, you would have seen what Matt Canavan did during the election. You're very, very pleased that you're back in government. And you must know that of all the front benches, as I say, after the Prime Minister and the Treasurer, surely Matt Canavan's probably next on the list in terms of campaigning effectiveness and doing so well in Queensland that you've been able to hold on in government. And yet here he is, banished to the back bench. It must be disappointing for everybody in the team.
Well, I'm going to dodge this one, Chris. I mean, I'm a neophyte. I'm new to politics. I'll leave these judgments to others. I think I'm a humble backbencher.
OK, and so is Matt Canavan now, so there you go. Just one final point. You would have heard that interview with Adam Crichton. You probably would have read his column. I mean, You have got a good economic record so far. You haven't started carving into debt yet because you haven't delivered the first surplus. But lowering taxation is the key element of your economic reform agenda. Does there need to be more? Surely there is more to do to reform this economy and to give the government a stronger agenda.
Well, I mean, as you said, I think in your introductory remarks, economic reform isn't something you do once and then it's done for all time. It's a continuous process, and you cited, I think, John Howard's quote in that regard. It's a marathon. You're always running. It's a treadmill, really. And look, I think there's always new things we can be looking at. But let's look at what we've done. I mean, firstly, we are rolling out major reforms and implementing major reforms like the National Disability Insurance Scheme, first of its kind. We're investing record amounts in hospitals and schools. We have delivered tax cuts. We're getting the budget back into surplus. We've got unemployment at a record low. We've created 1.5 million jobs here in Australia. We've got a big free trade agreement agenda. We're negotiating a free trade agreement about to start with the United Kingdom. We've got one underway with the European Union. These are all big things that are going to help our economy grow, help our exporters grow, and help jobs grow. So, sure, I'm always open to new ideas. I read Adam's column today. I think he's had some interesting things in there to say. But I think, we are actually getting a lot done already.
Dave Sharma, thanks so much for joining us.